please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Ford.
Present.
Councilmember Tremont.
Here.
Councilmember Stiltner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bastian.
Yep, here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. That was the most difficult roll call of all time.
I don't even have y'all's tags up.
That was maybe that's why.
I wasn't sure if I was really here or not.
I know.
With that workshop convening, this is our first budget workshop, and we are going to talk some very difficult issues and start to get the groundwork for that. Budget and vision guidance. The floor is yours, Dr. Niels.
Mayor and Council, City Manager, City Attorney, Dr. Scott Niels, the CFO and Finance Director for the city. I've been working with the City Manager and the department heads over the last month, trying to put this together in some cogent fashion. As you might remember, we've had some significant issues that affect our ability to work together. We have gotten pretty good at our teams though, so I'm very proud of the finance staff and the budget staff as we work together with the department heads to put this presentation together for you this evening. And, it's this presentation the City Manager sent out to you last week, and I've added a couple more slides today for some issues that we didn't have the information on when that went out last Friday. So our purpose today is to present you with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and look at it from two different areas. One is the 2020 budget, where we are today, and then the preliminary budget impacts for 2021 and also 2022. And then we would hope that we'd be able to get some council direction for our FY21 budget preparation from you tonight. That so as we go into our budget meetings with the departments, we have some guidance from the council of where you'd like to go. First one is the general fund revenues as of April. We are still working through some of the workday issues of making sure everything from Naviline got over correctly. These percentages are a little bit lower with the exception of taxes than we will have for you on our next report. Some of the entries for the allocations that did not get entered in here, so those percentages are actually a little bit higher than they show on this slide. The other thing is, you may remember, Workday and for the budget does an annual budget, and for many of the state revenue sources, they are 2 months behind. So the revenues we're getting today in May are back from March, and then we look for April. We get those in June. So it's 45 to 60 days by the time they get it. And I know, Jake, did you want to mention that information we just got?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I just received a bulletin from the state through our Finance Directors Association. It said the March sales tax is down $598.2 million, or 24.1% for March for the sales tax.
What's that number again?
Down $598.2 million and 24.1%.
That's for the state.
State sales tax, and their comment is it's predominantly due to the tourism, with folks not coming to Florida like they were.
Month.
As you can see on our taxes here, we're a total of 75%. Now in our taxes there are the, excuse me, we have our ad valorem tax. We also have utility service taxes in that category. We are currently at 75.25% of total. We're at about 98% of our ad valorem taxes, and I have a slide for that a little later. Permits and special all of the other ones, the charges for services, that's the one primarily impacted by the delay that we didn't get those in. Miscellaneous revenues, we probably, overall we're at 63%. We should be at about 58% with our year to date. Now I have, in February, I got permission from the City Manager to buy a modeling software called Municast. And it's an Excel-based system, and what it's done for us is it takes the last 2 years of monthly data for all of our primary accounts and averages those, and then takes that times our current year budget and then gives us what we would anticipate for a monthly budget. So I'm hoping to be able to give you what the budget comparison should be rather than looking at the annual one. I'll give you a seasonalized budget year-to-date, and those numbers will be much more
Actually,
accurate.
just anticipated a question of mine because our revenue streams are not even, so.
That's correct.
I'd like to know how they compare
Yeah,
as we
and-
receive.
And we'll have that in future reports for you.
Okay.
When you look at a workday report, that's looking at the annualized, all these percentages are percent of annual budget. So it's taking what we've done in the first 7 months of the year and comparing that to budget percent. And as you can see, the taxes one, we get most of our taxes from ad valorem in November, December timeframe. So that's going to front end load those. Another one, for example, on the other side is all the Parks and Rec revenues. Those are mostly in the summer. So by just taking 1/12 and comparing that to what it should be based on the seasonality, it doesn't give you a real picture of where we are and what our budget is.
So if I understand then your goal, what we're using as the benchmark, so to speak, that shows 7/12, is assuming all things are equal, even
That's
though
correct.
the way revenues come in, they don't come in equal.
That's correct.
Okay, so does the goal, is that simply because you've divided it by 12, or is that based on past years, we know that this is the.
Workday,
goal?
as it has now, does not have an annual allocate, or a monthly allocation of the budget. It's just one number.
Okay,
There isn't another module that we could get for that, but it's, but we don't have that one right now, but Municast will do that for us.
okay. So then, just a comparison for past years, so I have an understanding of that, this 63.53%, is that pretty much on track with past years, or way out of the norm, or?
You know, I printed that too small. We're actually, we should be at 65 on average.
Okay, so
We're just a smidgen
ballpark.
behind.
Got it, okay, thank you.
I guess a smidgen is a word.
But I'm sure it's like
We
a
should
defi-
be-
a defined
we should be
accounting
where
term.
that's where we have been in the past,
That's-
because
That's where we
we've
have
been in
been.
the wrong place the past few years, right?
Yeah, right?
That's right. That is,
But
Thanks.
we're usually at 65%.
Okay.
Yeah. The law of averages is a bad thing if you don't put it in perspective. This is a slide from Workday showing the cost centers instead of departments now they're called cost centers in Workday. And so these are all of the general fund cost centers. The original budget, as you can see, if you go straight down the second column of 40.6 million, that was the approved budget that the council approved last year for operating in FY20. The amended budget includes all budget resolutions that you have approved to increase budget for a specific purpose, whether it be a project or something else. Then this is April, so the April's month to date, the actuals year to date. Commitments are purchase order or requisitions that have not been converted into purchase orders. The obligations are requisitions that have been transferred into purchase orders. So if you look at the actuals and encumbrances, it means that the actuals year to date plus the commitments and obligations is the actuals and encumbrances. And then the budget remaining is the difference between the amended budget and the actuals and encumbrances. And that percentage is calculated from that field. Budget remaining divided by the amended budget.
Quick question,
Yes?
Jake, city manager's office has 195% overage. I assume that's just a,
Nothing to be,
sorry?
those aren't the George you're looking for. That is that's an aberration due to a workday.
I thought so.
Yep. We are not overspending.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I had someone ask me that. I said, I'm sure it's an accounting.
It's actually the Dave's Pest Control purchase, and
Oh,
the
that's
budget
right,
hasn't
Dave's
been
Pest.
entered yet.
Yep, that's
Okay.
right.
So as soon as the budget's entered, he'll be right on budget.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's right, Dave's Pest.
I checked, there was no new furniture or anything involved with
No.
it.
Sure as heck wasn't any in
We
mine.
did buy a case of water this morning.
Oh.
All right.
So where does that get, so the Davis Pest Control was purchased from that?
It's gone into inventory for sale.
Or
And
is
then when
gonna
we
show
sell
up
it,
on
it goes
there?
back into that?
Yeah, it'll come off of the overhead statement once the project is set up in Workday. It will then go into the balance sheet as an asset for sale. So it'll come out of the overhead and go onto the balance sheet. And one of the other things that Workday has done is, you may remember, we had a non-departmental department for all of the other things that normally didn't apply. We've gone through the non-departmental and tried to allocate those costs as closely as we could to the respective departments, so that those expenses will show up in the departments for their control, rather than just having a big lump of money in non-departmental. There are still some, but we're trying to winnow that down as much as we can. Any particular questions on the overhead?
Just the
Yes.
category development services, I assume that's community development?
Yes, ma'am.
It would be helpful, I don't know, is that a term that Workday uses that you can't change? Because it would be helpful on the charts to use the same nomenclature. Because I saw that and then I'm going through the other, I go, oh, okay, that must be community development. So,
Yes.
Yeah, I made that assumption looking at the number, but not everybody can do that.
yeah.
You're
Well,
right.
in development services,
Yeah.
it's like a weird, I don't know. Sounds like.
Generally, we can change titles or headings pretty much where we want to. Got it? Okay. Anything else on this slide?
Goal is 58.33%. Where are we normally at after April?
That's generally where we are. If you're
Okay.
looking again
I'm
at.
sorry, the goal is where, goal versus
Yeah, that's
actual?
7/12. That's taking, that's the 0.5833 is 7/12. So that's 7 months of the year.
I got you.
This-
I asked the question very sloppily. What I meant to say is what we have in for the time of year it is, 7 periods in, are we where we normally are?
Are you
No.
talking
Or how
about-
far off are we on
Are you talking about spending or revenue?
revenue?
Okay, this is spending
Revenue is-
side.
This is spending, revenue is the previous slide, we just chatted about that.
Mm-hmm. I'm still chatting about it.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's go back to the revenue side. This is what we were asking about, and I think the answer was 65% last year,
Yes, sir.
is where we were, total revenues?
Versus 63.5, so
That's right.
we're fairly close.
Yes.
So over the next couple months, as we see those lagging numbers, we'll start to see them.
We may see those numbers not continue to diminish, right? We may.
Particularly in the intergovernmental revenue, you'll see that take a hit from budget, and
Mhm.
we talk about that a little bit later here. And what normally happens from an accounting standpoint is the last month of the year gets really lumped in for all of the backup that they didn't have the first 2 years, or 2 months. So if you look at the actual booking for the month, you'll see blank in January, or in October, November, and then there'll be double hits at the end of the year to bring all of that current. So we make an accounting adjustment to bring it back from the next fiscal year into this current fiscal year, if that makes sense. Trying to match the revenues.
Is that how you also do the adjustment for the fact that you receive state funds about 2 months behind?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that's what you're talking about, okay.
13th month.
It's kind of like a 13th month, but it actually ends up being in September. So you'll see the number, what normally would be a monthly revenue in November, or in September, will be double that.
And when do you close the books? November 30th or
As
November 15th?
Quickly as we can after the end of the year.
Well, no, I mean typically you want to close out POs
Normally
that are
try to do
out.
it within 2 months at the end of the year,
Okay.
because we get
But-
the
But
auditors.
do you have an established date?
We did normally under Navaline, but now with Workday, we're not sure. We're gonna try to close
Okay.
as quickly as we can. Because
Gotcha.
the auditors usually come in for their field work in November, December timeframe.
And we're hoping, Marilyn, that it's quicker with Workday eventually, right? Because everything, it seems like everything's getting, transactions are getting done quicker. So we may be able to wrap up quicker, but traditionally, mid-November is when we're done. We give them like 30 days to wrap up POs, and then finance wraps up their piece in the next 15 to 20 days. So mid to end of November is when we're usually done and looking at James Moore coming in for the first look.
And one of the things, the reports that we had designed for us is an actual CAFR report. So we can push a button and have all the accounts that we had coming into Workday, we've mapped to give us the CAFR. And that's a major trouble of trying to get all that done, because the accountant's got to take it and do it, and now we can do it ourselves with their backup and say, yeah, that's right, and make sure we have everything the way we want it. Okay, and the revenues, Mayor? Okay. Any other questions on the overhead for the departmental statement? The green numbers in this case means it's under 58%. Just a side comment is that most of the savings in the general fund are from salary savings, and we'll talk about that a little bit, the vacancies that the city's had, because right now we budget at fully staffed, and so if there's vacancies in those departments as we go through the year, those savings are reflected in lower expenses in the department.
And that in turn gets put into the fund balance at the end of the,
That's
at the end
correct.
of the year.
Yes, sir.
Have there been departments where we've had vacancies year after year? So for budgeting, let's say 10 jobs for this department, in the last 3 years, we've been at 70%, but we still budget for 10.
We're gonna get into an in-depth discussion about that as we look at FY '21.
Okay.
And kind of talk through exactly what I think we're thinking about.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Here's where we are on some of the other selected funds. General fund we've already talked about. A couple of comments on the CRA ones, 102 and 103. Those expenses in there are primarily debt service funds. And so we're April and October are the dates that we make payments for that debt. There are some marginal other expenses, but that's the primary expense in those two funds. And so those will be right on, almost 100% at the end of the year. Under recreational facilities, that's where we put the YMCA rent, and there's about 200,000 in contingency in that fund, and so we're looking for uses for that, so that city manager would be able to manage that fund, or the council can redirect those monies in that fund. On community development, primarily in the 109 fund, they've got a amount set aside for the new software that they're developing, and so as soon as that software comes online, then those expenses will be there. That's the primary thing that I could note in that particular fund, along with the other building things that they normally do. The 109 fund is also taking care of the remodel upstairs for Tim's department. In the 301 fund, capital fund, I got these notes from Tim and from Lynn. That fund it's partially for Tim and partially for Lynn. It's a sales tax, or the gas tax. That's paving, sidewalks, Yorktown. He said the community development has a few projects in this line funds that have not been spent, and there are TPO projects that have not yet been selected for design. So that's funding that's set aside for those. Tim says we anticipate moving forward with design on the eastbound Dunlawton right turn lane at Clyde Morris, and it's project number PNC 018 or 018, and Dunlawton westbound right turn lane at City Center, and that's project number IMI 011 for late 2020 or early 21. Got other projects in this line, are street light project AI 0016, and we anticipate this being completed by the end of FY20, and at this time 90% of that budget has been used. And those are his notes from Capital Projects Fund 301. In the 306 transportation capital projects, he says that's budgeted funds for the Dunlawton median landscape project. Project is sent to begin in July, and this is why the fund is at zero. Appears to be the only project at this time for FY20. So as we go down the list on the excuse me, water sewer repair and replacement fund and stormwater utility. talking with Lynn today, said we're right now trying to learn the difference between the Workday project report, which gives us the life-to-date project information, and this particular report, which is our budget to actual, and that just does the current year. So we're still trying to figure out the best way to give you the information on this data, because they don't necessarily reconcile, because the budget for this year is just this year's budget, but in the project it has a life-to-date budget for however long that project's been in existence. So we'll figure that out and be able to report to you a little more cogently. In the solid waste one, we have, you can see in the obligation field, the encumbrances and actuals. Normally what they do in that fund is to do a purchase order for their anticipated expenses for the solid waste and for the tipping fees at the first of the year. So that fund is particularly obligated almost 100% at the beginning of the year. Golf course, that's one, the entries just haven't been made yet. That's an allocation that comes out of the golf course monthly financials, and that's one that when I talked to Cynthia today, she said we just have not gotten to that particular one, but we will here shortly. Lease and replacement, part of the expenses in that area is the fee for Workday. That's where that's been booked into replacement, lease and replacement fund.
Doc, can you, forgive me, I was writing down when you were, something when you were going over the
Okay.
403 fund. Can you rehash that again? Did we,
Certainly.
combine
When
other?
in Workday, there was two different ways to do it. One was to have the project totally separate from the financials, and then the project software integrated with the financials. And I elected to do integrated. That way I don't have to reconcile those two systems. Well, the problem that it does though is if I do a project report, it gives me the life to date on that project. So it may be a project that's been going on for 3 or 4 years. And that's what the budget would show in that report. When I do a budget to actual for this particular fund, it only shows what the current year budget is. So if I ask a department director or the project manager, what's your budget? They're thinking of the project budget, not the year-to-date budget in this report. So if I ask Lynn, well, why is there this variance? She, without looking at a whole bunch of different reports, she couldn't tell me. And so we will fix that, and we'll get that information to you shortly as soon as we figure it out. But, I trust the Workday numbers. I've gone through them enough now that I have a really good handle on what they are. It's just getting all that information together to present it to you properly, so that we don't have to go this kind of discussion. I can tell you this is what it is and I know why.
Thanks, sir.
Does that help?
Yes,
I
sir.
hope. Any other questions on this? Okay. I know that with the utility billing, there's a question about what's happened with all those accounts, because the council has authorized the waiving of fees. This is as of April month, or as of May month end. The cutoff amount is what those particular customers would have to pay in order to get their water turned on. There are different classifications. You can see the A class at the top left, that's the active accounts. And then there's different categories. The C is commercial, and there's a code up there for you. The S is they're kind of like in a suspense account. Those are all liened accounts. So the water that they're getting has a lien already on that property for whatever the utility bill is. And then the V is for vacation. So when we looked at where our real risk was, the renters in each category are the ones where there's a higher probability that they're going to abandon the property. And so there's, for the renter account, there's a deposit of $175 to open the account. For a commercial account, for a owner account, it's $100. So I did a quick calculation for you. There's 769 renter accounts on this list, and at 175, that's almost $135,000. And if you look at what their past due is for those same accounts, it's about $112,000. So if none of them paid, we would sort of be covered by the deposits that they have, which is a good place to be. If we go out to the next month, the current balance is what the month would be for the May billing, And you can see the difference. There's 173,000 additional billing for these same accounts that are in a past due status. So if you look at the current balance, that's the total amount that would be due, including the May bill, which will be due in June. So we, excuse me, in working with Kristen, we've come up with a script to call all of the renters first and say that we know that June 1st is coming up, that the waiver of fees is gone, and your first bill, the cycle 1, will be due June 15th. So we want to let you know this is how much it is. We have an option for you to do a pay over time for those past due amount, and legal worked with us to come up with that contract. So if they agree to do that, then that whatever their past due amount would be allocated over 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 months and added to their bill. And as long as they pay their current bill plus their past due amount, then we've said that, okay, we'll go ahead and turn your water back on. And we think that's a fair way of doing it. We're hopeful that with the effort that we're putting in calling every customer, and we're going to put information on their current bill, that will help. The other thing on the water bills that we've just sent off to Paymentus today to put the script that we have for opening up the accounts of what script we want to have in there for our for when we want to turn it off and on. It will automatically go, if the customer wants to a telephone pay. So I'm really excited to get that in. And once they get all that set up in the background, it'll probably be maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and we should have an online pay system back up again. Full Paymentus will be probably 60 to 90 days before we get the full featured system.
What proportion of our customers have taken advantage of the deferral to pay the bill? Or stated another way, what proportion of customers are paying just like normal on time? Do you
Most
know
of them, we
that?
have about a little over 28,000 customers, so the 1,800 is not quite 9%, 8%,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then pretty much that stays constant throughout.
Okay.
So it hasn't gone up a lot. I mean, the month before was about the same number, if you looked at April numbers.
What does that look like in past years?
About the same,
About the same.
yeah, about the same. So they call them the frequent flyers that wait till the last minute, and then many of them pay. And this one we did last time, we had that here a few months back. We can't turn all of the people on at the same time, so we split the list and worked with Public Works to make sure that we can get everybody turned on after they pay their bill.
I did have, Jake and I talked last week, and one of the things that we discussed with the folks that are going to be hit with a 3-month bill coming up, that can be daunting for a lot of folks, particularly the fixed income folks or for people that haven't had an income last few months. I think what staff's put together is a reasonable payment plan available, in addition to folks who are listening or watching know that there are a number of nonprofit groups out there that are raising significant amount of money to help situations just like this. So if there is a need, then we can work when we get to it.
And we'll be working with Christine to make sure that that information gets out. And Kristen and her customer service representatives have a list of those nonprofits and other people that can help them with payments. So we're trying to do the best we can on that for them.
Plus, one of the other things to consider is we're looking at the CDBG COVID money on how we can use that. One of the things that Alan reminded me is that if we want to use CDBG money, we can use it outside census tract areas if we take the financial information of the people that are applying for loans. So as soon as we get an administrator for our COVID CDBG money, we may be able to utilize some of that to help offset some of the costs if folks can't pay.
It would be a loan, you say? They'd apply for a loan?
I would
Or
hope.
a grant?
I would hope, but it'd probably be a grant. So that's not a given right now. We're looking into it, but that might be an option as well. But another thing that you mentioned is fixed income. But fixed income is a good place to be right now, because your bill didn't go up and your income is fixed. So you still should be paying. One of the things that Scott brings up is he calls them frequent flyers, but people wait, and then the day before shut off, they call you and make you feel guilty about how can you shut me off and only gave me 1 day notice. So let it be known that we send a lot of notices out and do the courtesy call the night prior to give them one last ditch effort, because the last thing I want to do is send a guy out there to get in the conversation with somebody at the door about, yeah, hold on 1 second, I'll write you a check right now. Well, our meter guys can't take money. So we provide them a lot of options, and we'll continue to give it a try, because we want these people to keep their water, and we want them to pay their bills. So we'll work with them every step of the way.
Scott, I will say too, just a compliment to your staff, that it's extremely rare that I ever get any kind of an email or something about this type of a scenario, but in the past, you guys have gone to pretty good lengths to dot the I's and cross the T's, and even though somebody says, I had no idea, we come to find out that, yeah, you did. We sent this many notices and called and put something on their door and all that kind of different stuff. So that's always very beneficial to us when those scenarios
I'll pass
do
that
occur.
on.
So pass that
I'm very,
on to
very
staff.
proud of Kristen and her team back
Yeah.
there, and also with the Public Works. They work very closely together to
Right.
make sure that that's the best thing we can do for our
Yep.
customers. Any other questions on this? Okay. One of the other things that came up was what's happened with our water and our reclaimed water. You can see that
It's dry.
it's dry, and so the gray line the blue line is 17, the orange line is 18, and the gray line is 19. And the bars are what we've done so far year to date up to April. And so I have both the water billed consumption and then the billed amount. So the top one is how much they used, and the bottom one is how many dollars we charge them. So you can see that in general, yes, April has gone up, but it's a little higher this year than it has been in the last 3 years.
Doug, just a side note, not to do with this, but I like to print out my slides, and I'm noticing 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, those are ones I added today, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, if you do me a favor, if you could email those to us in
We cer-
advance, even if it's at 5:55, that's okay, because this monitor doesn't work near as good as this one for me.
I was looking for more today.
I'll give it to you right now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Because actually, I was looking at the monitor on the wall because I can read that one better than I can the one in front of me.
Sorry about that.
Everybody was at
That's
home.
all right.
Thanks.
You know, not going to work, not going, so that, I mean, May's gonna be the same way.
Scott, this pertains to reclaimed water or
Not just you.
or potable?
Coming up.
Okay.
This is potable.
Because I helped out with the reclaim thing. I called the weatherman. They put rain in the forecast.
Yeah.
For 6 days.
Yeah, so a
You
reclaim
guys would have
supply
told me
will be,
sooner. I would have just.
we're probably gonna have to pump some out, you know.
Scott will be taking all the calls.
Yeah.
I have my number forwarded to Monica.
He's got a pool, we can put the excess reclaimed water in his
Yeah.
pool.
All right, let's go.
Okay, the next one is for reclaim, so it shows a similar story. But the billed consumption is, the actual consumption, as you said, is way above what the average has been. I suspect probably May will be even higher based on the comments we've gotten, so I'll provide that information once we complete the month of May. I had sewer too, but I didn't have time to do that. If you're interested, I'll put that slide in it and send it out to you. But I thought these two were probably the ones that you were most interested in, because sewer pretty much matches the water.
Reclaim.
Okay?
Thanks, Robin.
So what has the impact been? You may remember, right when we looked at the COVID situation, we set up a project to track our costs, and that was ZEM 020. And so far, we've got just a little under $33,000, and this is for cleaning and personal protective equipment and telecommuting supplies. Includes additional computers, headphones, hand sanitizer, gloves, all sorts of that type of thing. And there are some other expenses. I know Alan, when this first came up, had some time that was tracked for some people that were doing some setup things. That is not included in this number. This is strictly just P-card expenses for the most part.
I had a question about that, but there are staff that were on board already, so all we're doing is tracking what proportion or what is the cost figure attributable to this.
Basically what we might be able to get reimbursed
Yeah,
by FEMA.
Okay,
But-
it's not
but it's-
an addition.
No,
Okay,
No,
that's what I thought, but I just,
no overtime or minor, if anything, overtime for
right,
for
okay,
COVID.
that's where I was with that.
And it's really helpful because in Workday, you're able to take the actual receipt, you tag it with that particular project, and it goes into the approval process, so the department head looks at it, the supervisor looks at it, I look at it because I'm the project manager for this. And so I can go print a report with a push of a button, say, here's my expenses, and I have a complete detail of all of the expenses. That's just fabulous for me.
So one of the things that I was just reminded, back on the water, not the reclaim, but the potable, in March, April, we lost 20 million gallons on that 16-incher that was going across. So we pumped about 20 million gallons into the Halifax, making sure it was clean. So that's been resolved, but we pumped a lot of water trying to find that leak.
So, not including staff time and other lost revenue, would we say, as far as liquid, 32,000 is about what
We have written checks for $32,500 worth of stuff to deal with COVID.
Okay.
But you know, Alan and I, the first 5 days of shutdown, we were all, the mayor's been in Zoom meetings or conference calls. Those from a FEMA reimbursement, everyone we go to counts as an hour or whatever we do, reimbursable if they choose to reimburse us for it. So we account for all that. But that you were paying that bill anyhow.
Right.
So, but cash out the door, 32.5.
Would that also, when you take into consideration staff time, I'm jumping ahead because I understand that the county is going to be distributing funds to the cities as well. I'm wondering what that would cover.
So are
Be
we.
eligible. All right, we don't have that.
That's something, that was a
think it's gonna be
today
different.
development.
It's
so-
not going to
And
be.
then
Yeah,
the-
it's not going.
the
It's not going to
resolution's
go
yet to be
into
written.
our wages and salaries. I know that. And really, it probably should go to our citizens somehow.
Right.
When I had a discussion with Deb Dennis about it this morning, I told her it's not just about recovering COVID-19 costs, but there's also costs that we incur regardless, public safety and things like those costs go on, but our revenues are affected. So I don't know exactly how that conversation, but that was prior to their meeting today.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of their conversation today, so we'll see. They haven't done the resolution yet, that was an authorization to create the resolution, we'll see what they do.
The
Good
next
question.
data point here is, we discussed earlier that the state revenue lags 45 plus days. So we're just now getting that information. As far as city services, there were no layoffs or furloughs of staff. The police, there were some cutbacks on services, for example, the VIPs and fingerprinting and VIN verification. Fire was at full service. Public Works and Public Utilities were in full service. Parks and Rec, we had cancellation of most activities. Community Development, some cutbacks on inspections. Finance, no customer service window, but generally operating full service. Other departments, full service, mostly remote. And finally, as you know, the council meetings were virtual and minimal in chamber participation. So the COVID-19 has definitely impacted the city operations, and the city manager, at least right now, has indicated that probably June 1st will reopen. So all of the departments that I'm aware of are ready for that, including the finance department. So the impact for FY20 and where are we now? As far as revenue, year-to-date ad valorem receipts are at just under 99% of the budget, which is quite helpful. The balance for intergovernmental estimated down 30% from the budget base. That was kind of a consensus from the finance directors. We've been meeting weekly on Zoom meetings. It was 20 to 30%, and I took the conservative approach of 30% down, and that's $1 million hit. Minimal or no summer program revenues, that's offset by reduced operating expense. Susan estimates that's a net $60,000 loss. Active community development, Tim estimates there's another $200,000 that will be above what he had budgeted originally. So there is some good news on that.
I had a question about
Sure.
that. What accounts for the upturn? Because I thought I had read something, or we had talked, maybe it was an article in the paper, that really building permits haven't been that many more in 2019. So why are community development increased fees so high?
I'm sure
We
Tim.
didn't go up
I'm
on
sure,
fees.
I'm sure Tim's listening. Well, just because the newspaper reports that average
Okay, in
building
our-
doesn't mean that in Port Orange we're not booming. If you recall, we approved a lot of things, or there's been
Okay.
a lot on our docket lately that's gone through that
Okay.
And the
that I
dollar value of
imagine.
those permits has an impact as well.
And so he just chimed in that it's the site inspection fees for site work. So
Okay.
Woodhaven, things of that
Gotcha.
nature, they're all moving forward. So
Okay, and then I did have a question about Parks and Rec. I understand minimal or summer program revenues will be down, as will their operating expenses. Do we hire a lot of people? I mean, how are we gonna?
we hire a lot of summer help.
Okay, that's
and
what I
we're
thought.
and we're adjusting that now because we're going to do a summer camp light.
Okay.
But Susan, I haven't talked to Susan in the past 2 days about it, but one of the CDC recommendations is that you have a staff, and then you have a standby staff in case the staff gets
Gotcha.
sick. So we might, I think she's going to get creative, but we might have to double staff to make, hire two to make one, or put another on standby and not pay them. I don't know how she's going to do it, but I know she's been
Well, they're working
thinking
some
about
sort
that
of
now.
on-call
You bet.
compensation. Yeah,
Yep.
schedule. Okay, thank you.
Would it be prudent that if our entire staff gets sick, that you just nix the rest of the summer? Or do we want to replace them with more people, or is that just, we keep that in our back
It's
pocket?
back pocket. That's a great idea till you get 50 phone calls from people and go, Jake, what are you going to do about this? And then all of a sudden when I say I got people in my back pocket, you think I'm a rock star. Susan is a rock star, as she's probably emailing me now.
Probably.
On the expense side, we've forecast about $600,000 in savings from this is the vacant positions that you were mentioning a little earlier. This is for the last half of the year. The other part of that savings was in the first part of that overhead budget that we saw. And then frozen programs, the city signage at I-95, Parks and Rec projects, the ADA Master Plan Phase 2, the ACE 2000 closed caption machine, and some IT projects. And then in project savings, on the other side, David Van Valkenburg has a report that comes out every week, and he shows the savings from projects and what they were estimated at and what the actual project bid was. There are some savings that we have there that will be available to be reallocated. Okay, here's the graph of the ad valorem. You can see that obviously that's the budget, and the orange line is the budget, the blue line is the actual. That's a cumulative number, and there's no change out there in the last from May going forward, because that's just the budget. We'll probably get very close to that. We come in almost at budget every year. There's always some lag where you don't get that and then you collect it in the subsequent years. If you look in the CAFR, there's a schedule of that in the back that shows what the current year current year collection rate is, and then what the collection rate is overall. And so we usually, of the levy, we're usually at 96 to 98% of the levy. And you may recall that of the levy, we only budget 95% of the levy.
So, and just to verify, we are 98.7% of the 95%.
That's correct.
Yep.
So if we look at what would happen in the rest of the year, you can see the actuals are up through April, and then the rest is E for estimate. We began the fiscal year with $14,403,000 in our fund balance of unassigned. You just saw that was from James Moore that just reported that. And so this is based on the rest of the year forecast, what would happen to our fund balance. So we're estimating from the 14.4 that we have there, I'm estimating just under 14 million, so about a $500,000 net reduction in our fund balance, still above the 30% that council has set. That's assuming all of the revenue and expense things we just talked about, which may change.
And that's with the estimated drop in revenue.
That's correct.
Sales and gas tax?
Gas is restricted,
Okay.
so that won't.
Yeah, okay, yes, you're right.
This is
So
just this is just general
indirectly,
fund.
Councilmember, indirectly, because if we don't have that restricted tax, we don't do paving. If you don't do paving and you want to, you gotta pull from the general fund to do it. So it would offset, we'd either not do the infrastructure repair
Right.
or pay for it somehow
Right,
else.
right, okay.
Hey,
Scott, I'm sorry.
Go back.
My apologies.
That's what it takes to get a comment. You gotta change the slides.
Yeah, sorry about that. If you can go back to your slide for just a second, just
Which one?
that one right there,
Oh.
perfect.
Mhm.
Just comment briefly on, so the difference between November 2019 and December 2019, why is that massive jump?
Ad valorem,
Is that all of it, pretty much?
pretty much.
Okay,
What'd you say?
Ad valorem
Ad
tax.
valorem.
got it.
Oh, as that starts rolling in,
Mhm.
the numbers
Makes sense.
Yeah.
increase initially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. So if we look at the assumption that the COVID impact will continue on, even though I've forecasted it will be less aggressive in future years, there is the potential for us to take a real hit in our fund balance if we do all of the things we'll talk about in just a minute. And that orange line there is where we ended last year, FY19. So this is part of the reason for the discussion, that if we don't change the way we have budgeted, we have a potential for eating into our fund balance below what you've set as your objectives. So what are some possible actions? On the revenue side, good news is we just recently received the preliminary values on May 21st. Looks like the values for Port Orange are up 8%. Included
What
in
was last year, Scott?
It was
6.7?
7.2, I think.
7.2? Okay,
Seven point
got it.
something.
I thought it was 7.2. If not, I know I'm close.
And I really anticipate that housing values aren't going to be affected significantly for the next couple of years. Because this isn't like the housing crisis back in 2008,
Right.
9. In that number, there's also a little over 55 million in new property, which at the current tax rate would generate an extra 250. So there's an increase of additional revenue there from new property.
Scott, I had a question.
Sure.
Was this slide before we got the letter from Larry Bartlett? Because his letter that Jake sent us looks like another 2 mil. And new property value, tax, and new construction, 57,649,218.
The one I saw was just the new property was 55 3. And I didn't add that 400,000 that was on there for that, they just took what it said, new property?
Yeah, this is just says new construction, June 1st?
What year? You're looking at 2019? Sorry.
Yes, I'm
It was
sorry.
2019.
Yeah, I know.
2019 was a good year.
Well, you know, I printed them and I go, wait a minute, I got the same
So
letter here. Now I know.
One of the
Sorry.
council members asked for a comparison from last year, so I sent both years.
Okay,
I apologize.
Good
Now I
question, though.
should read it more closely.
Can we use the
Okay.
best? Can we use the best?
Easy
No, we'll
killer.
stick with 19s.
Yeah, okay.
And then for state revenue sharing, the consensus was down 10% in 2021 and then down 5% in 2022. And that equates to 860,000 and 566. And that's built into my model. It shows that decline in the overall revenues and fund balance.
Why do you think there's going to be a continued decline in 2022 in state revenue? Because that's the direction the legislature's going? Unfunded mandate, okay.
Yeah, you'll have to forgive our skepticism of the models. We've seen enough of Allen's up here.
A model's always as good as the data you put in it. Okay, how about some revenue considerations for the council? These are things over which we have control. The millage rate, we can look at the allocation from proprietary funds, for example, the payment in lieu of taxes. Generally, we try to make sure it's a supportable number that we go through and do our analysis. It's been a while since we've done that, so that's on our budget team's to-do list. Review allocations from the internal service funds. It may be that we are not using the right allocation methodology. For example, in IT, do we use computers or do we use whatever it may be? So we'll take a look at all of that for this coming year. Certainly the fees for charges for services and or fines. That's always up to the council to be able to adjust those to something, whatever you think is reasonable. And certainly Amanda's got her spyglass out there for review of grant opportunities. So as Jake likes to say, we always like to use other people's money if we can. And so those are some of the things that we
Well,
have
it's
control.
our money just from other sources.
That's true.
Do we want to go through those right now, Jake?
I'd like to.
Do you want to finish the presentation?
No,
and come
I'd
back
like to
these?
set the stage on this slide.
Okay.
It's something you hear from me every year. I want the proper fund to pay the proper amount, but I don't want to do, and it happened a little bit before I got here and less so now hopefully, but I don't want to use the proprietary funds as a way to shield the general fund and the millage. Proprietary funds
I don't want to
actually
go back to 2013.
right. So you're
Let me just say
you're
it.
just shifting the burden right to the fee, whatever that fee is, stormwater, water, sewer. Internal service funds, that's a constant battle. Do we charge people by square foot? Do we charge them by amount of time spent? There's a lot of ways to do that, so we're constantly trying to tweak that. Charges for services and fines. In the past, you've looked for a recoupment fee for Parks and Rec and other fees. We bring up that fee resolution every year for review and tweak it when we're talking about Causeway Park fines next week, I think. So we're always looking at that, but the fees for charges, well, services, but the fines are to stop a behavior, not to get revenue, right? We don't fine
I think
people
we all agree with that.
to raise revenue. So you know that is a revenue consideration, but it is not a why we want to do it. We'd be fining people for everything, right? So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And OPM is always on the table. So
Well, but I do recall that we revisited the issue of the fine for when you built something or did something without a permit. Because we thought we were out of whack on that one, and then just
We're
last.
addressing a fairness issue.
That's
Right,
a, yeah.
Right.
And then last week, we just looked at, oh, help me, it had been 30 years, animal registration. So I guess I would just ask, I think we're all on the same page from what I've heard, but I don't know, has staff truly looked at all the fees and fines across the organization?
We have, give or take, there might be one or two laying
Well,
out
it's the
there.
give or take
but-
that I'm interested
Well,
in.
so here's, and we welcome your fresh set of eyes that when we bring up the fee resolution, often we do the science and bring it up, and it gets bumped down a little bit in the effort of a happy compromise. So we bring them up often, especially if we think they're too low for us to operate. So those get a lot of attention often. We talk about park fees. We talk about animal fees because we haven't touched them for 30 years. But I'd imagine that they were visited a couple times and kind of shoved off to the side and just forgotten about. But not forgotten about, but
But
ignored on
also,
purpose.
well, we may look internally, city, do we do a comparison with all the other cities? Because we're so good about doing that with salaries, but are we paying the going rate? Are we asking users to pay, if you will, the going rate
The
compared
department
to other
heads
municipalities?
usually do for things
Parks
that
and
we
Rec
want to
especially.
compare. Parks and Rec usually, but
Okay.
but not for. We'll tell you what the other water and sewer fees are. As a matter of fact, I think Scott reported that the other day for what was it, water, but it's almost apples and oranges.
Okay.
But yes, usually you get a comparison or at least a report on where we sit with those, and it gets asked every time on the hot topics. What's so and so paying for that? What's so and so paying for that? So, and you're right, absolutely salaries.
Okay, thank you.
I think, before you move on, I'm just gonna sit here right now. I generally don't like a millage rate discussion to happen in a vacuum. We think our millage rate should be this or that. I don't want us thinking, well, let's see, we're gonna generate these revenues, let's go find what we can fill to spend. I don't want, and on the flip side of that, I don't wanna have that conversation, this is what we're gonna receive, and then not have the hard conversation about on other years where we have to make policy decisions about what we don't have. And I think we all know that every year we have a turn-the-page budget that's going to create more costs than last year, particularly because we all know we have taken care of our employees, we've included raises, and that's just by itself is going to create the costs every year. That being said, no matter what the millage rate is, me personally, I think we need to design a rollback budget or better in a year like this. I know that is going to create some tough decisions for this council, and I'm not going to shy away from those tough decisions. But we are the ones that set the policy, and if anybody disagrees with me, say so now. But this is the wrong year, with everything that's going on, to be talking about any kind of an increase beyond rollback. And I know that's tough.
Go back to the revenue slide. So, absolutely.
But I think that any conversation involves anything going higher than rollback is a non-starter with me this year.
Right there. So, if you think I'm not trying to dissuade you from saying that, but if you look at the revenue that Scott mentioned from the preliminary, which was up 8%, and the $250,000 worth of additional money we'll probably get from new construction. And then you look at that $1 million bogey right there, and take a fraction of that, and then you add all that stuff you just talked about. Our speculation is a turn-the-page budget will get you above rollback. So as we're going through this budget process, if a rollback is the true rollback, if that's what you're talking about, you're going to have to start thinking about services.
Absolutely, and I
okay.
recognize that.
Yep, okay.
But what I'm saying is, if somebody paid $750 to the city of Port Orange last year
Yeah.
on their tax bill, I really don't want them having to pay $751 this year. If they paid $300 to us, I don't want them having to pay $301.
Yep, all right.
And in any given year, when we're booming, and there are things that we have to do, I understand that, and I know that we're going to have to make tough decisions up here on policy. I'm not going to shy away from that, and what I'm trying to tell you as staff is that I'm not going to sit here and say cut it and then you go find it. You tell us, you make the suggestions to us, we'll make those decisions.
Sure.
But if that's what it takes to get to rollback, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to.
I
I'm not
think
going to. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to play chicken with it and say.
I think I was
get us
painting
to
the
roll
picture.
back and you go find it.
I think I was painting the picture so everybody understood, I
Okay.
guess, what you were saying. Okay.
And I'm
thanks,
just saying
Scott.
that we're not going to, and if we say rollback, we shouldn't shy away from talking about how to get there. That should be on us too.
A couple questions about revenue. Where are we with the FEMA reimbursement? Did we ever get Matthew in full? That was about 100.
No, ma'am.
200,000. Okay, and Irma was about 2.6 million. Is any of that likely?
Likely? Yeah, we haven't
I
got.
mean, within this fiscal year, some of it?
Yeah.
What do we
Alan,
think?
Alan's got Alan fights his fight. He fights for $5 from FEMA every day.
It starts from scratch every day.
Yeah, Alan Rosen, Assistant City Manager. Right now, one of the big things on my plate is we got an RFI, which is called, this is for Matthew, a request for information from the state of Florida requesting everything that we've sent to the state and the feds about 5 or 6, 7 times. And some of it I find that I didn't have, and we do send to them. They're legitimate questions. I think right now my plate, I've probably got about 100 questions, some of them very detailed, and questions within questions, like for example that I sent to the fire and police department, where they're asking, hey, we saw on somebody's 214 on X date they said this, but we're not sure how that relates to the scope. Can you please ask that person, who's either dead or no longer here, what exactly they were doing on that day, so you can add to this so we can make sure that you're going to get the reimbursement for that or not. Like, that's the detail to which they're going to, and I'm clawing at it as quickly as I can, trying to get the answers out to them before they close the RFI and then put it on a denial.
So, because you're doing Matthew first, and then Irma's still in the hopper?
Yeah, Irma is actually, so the reason I'm working really on Matthew is because I'm the only one that was still here that really worked on public assistance back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then the current emergency manager and grants accountant are working on more of the Irma stuff.
Okay.
But we're still a couple mil in the hole with Irma.
Yeah, and even though the stuff has been, a lot of it's been obligated even
Docs and all.
even for Matthew from the
Yeah.
state, from the feds, it's at the state level, and then the state hires KPMG. This is actually something I've talked to Florida League of Cities about, because I feel like what KPMG and all these big companies are doing are, since he's gone, I'm going to talk, are basically just taking money from the state, and the state has no idea what questions they're asking us, and they're just trying to do more work and more work and more work. When I was talking to some auditors, they're like, wait, they're doing 100% audit? We don't do 100% audits for anything. Why are they doing that? I think it's just because they want to make more money from the state.
Is now the time perhaps for the mayor and the manager to go talk with our state representatives and explain to them, or maybe you explain what's happening and see if we can't.
They're already aware. Yeah,
Yeah, and we've
Congressman Walton and General Audino.
Well, but Alan was describing at the
The
state
state.
Yeah.
is the one creating some of the issues.
Yeah, I've
So I
sat in
think
Tom
you-
Lake's office. I'll do it again.
Yeah, I think
I'll
the
do as
more
many times as I got to.
pressure we can provide to them, the better. Like
I
s-
think if there's nearly 100 questions within a question, those are things they need to see.
Yeah, and I've worked with Shannon Ball, our emergency manager, who has contacts at the state FDEM, to let them know, because KPMG is really hired by them to do a job, and they may not know exactly what questions. And I've said, hey, show them the questions they're asking us. The first time they came back in February, asked a bunch of questions. We answered as many as we could. They came back again, asked the same questions 3 months later, and half of the stuff I know is in EMI, which is the federal system. And I said, no, I'm not going to answer these questions. You go and look, because I'm sure 90% of it is in EMI. And they're like, oh, sorry about that. We'll go look. And then they took about 10 questions off and then asked me some of the same questions over again. Anyway.
Hey, Alan.
Well, of course, they're charging probably by the
Yes.
hour.
Yes.
Hey, Alan.
So,
Yeah.
Bingo.
I think it would probably behoove you and me to sit with Representative Leak again and give him an update,
Sure.
because when I talked to him in January, things were kind of changing
Yeah.
up there from the last administration,
Right.
their approach.
Yeah.
And now we're into, and I think he needs to know these frustrations firsthand. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
think if you could, we'll talk, but let's set up a meeting with Representative Leak.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't think it's an FDM issue as much as they need to know what questions
KPMG
their
issue.
contractor's asking us, so that
Mhm.
they don't get.
And if they're
raked over
getting
the
built,
coals for
they
money.
need to know it.
thank you, yeah,
That's the point.
thank you.
Thank you.
These have been the traditional assumptions under which we've built a budget. Personnel at full staffing, wages up by contract, benefits increasing 7 to 10%, pension contribution increase based on actuarial reports, an operating expense, and Mayor, you'd mentioned this, the turn the page budget and review areas for savings, incorporate contract increases, whether it be mowing or whatever it may happen to be. But we don't have any across-the-board controls for inflation. We didn't just add 2% to everything. Jake, did you have any comments on those?
Nope, I'm good for now.
And then Jake had mentioned expense reduction. We need to take a look in that case, what services would be impacted, what personnel cost, what projects we would defer, and what efficiencies that we can identify in the city. And that concludes our presentation, and whatever Jake has for that.
Jake, I'm sure you got a ton of questions for us.
Not yet. I have some comments. FY21 budget, there's some things out there that we paid for that are very discretionary. I'd like to bring your attention just as a scene setter. I'm not asking you to keep them or cut them tonight. I just want you to know. We spend $263,975 on mowing other people's lawns. FDOT mowing maintenance is part of that, and the county road mowing is part of that. And that includes, FDOT gives us a contract to perform. They give us $70,000 a year to do Dunlawton, Nova, Ridgewood, and Peninsula north of Dunlawton. And then the county, which doesn't give us any money, we expend $102,000 on that, and that's Williamson Airport, Taylor, part of Spruce Creek Road, and Clyde Morris from Dunlawton to Taylor. So that savings total would be $263,975.
Jake,
Yep.
when you say that savings, you suggesting not doing it, or?
I didn't say that. I just want you to know how much it costs, and we don't. That is money spent for a service level above and beyond what the owner would provide.
Okay.
Um,
And when you say mowing other lawns, we're talking Dunlawton, we're talking,
we are talking
Every county and
our,
state road in
our,
our city.
yeah, every
Right.
county and state road in our city.
gotcha.
Which if we mowed Dunlawton at the FDOT 70 grand, it would look a lot different.
And
If
so
we,
would our
if
property
we allowed,
values.
if we allowed the county to mow Williamson, it would look a lot different. They
And
mow
so would our
quarterly.
property values.
We mow, once a week.
How much would it cost for you to hire the additional people to answer the phone calls?
Yeah, about $263,000. Well, you all would answer them and you just forward those
To
emails.
you, and
us.
then you'd have to, yeah.
So,
Are they,
Transfer will be on speed dial.
I'm just,
are they underperforming their contract with us, or that's just their standard?
that's your standard. Yep. That, their service level is quarterly, ours is weekly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just drive down the interstate and look at the
Oh, yeah,
medians.
I get it.
That's what Williamson would look like, and Dunlawton, and any
Take a
other
look at
roads.
stretches of Clyde Morris every summer.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, just telling you guys don't
Well,
have to.
maybe we could go to 2 weeks.
You don't have to argue over it right now. ADA transition, we have made some gains in ADA transition right now. We have a phase 1 plan that was supposed to be followed with a phase 2 plan, $200K each phase. Phase 1 is, I don't want to say daunting, but there's a lot of work to be done, and we're not going to get there quick. So we feel that we can save the $200K in that transition plan, which would help, and
Just based on
we
timing.
wouldn't spend that next year either.
I want to make sure I'm clear. When you say in the transition time, you're saying we remain in phase 1 and we don't transition to 2 yet?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And then, as Scott Neal said, we budget for 100% personnel. I am not a big fan of budgeting less than 100%, but there are two places where we can't fill, and it's a consistent thing. One of them won't matter to the general fund, but one of them will. Our police officers are hard to fill, and our utility operators as well. But that's in Lynn's bucket for water. But still,
That's an enterprise fund.
yeah, but it's still something that we have problems filling, but I'm working with Jamie, and we're looking at maybe a happy medium to save some money.
Well,
And
can we look at our 5-year history on vacancy rate and see what that?
I'm working with Jamie to come up with a plan to find out what the best thing is. One of the things we do is if we don't have a position or a position filled, but need that job done, we'll hire remedy employees. So some of that will have to still happen to keep keep the motor running. But some of it we don't hire remedy for police officers right now.
Have we seen any change in applicants since businesses closed? I mean, has the workforce at all said, gee, maybe a police job or a fire job might be good, because at least
I don't.
they're going to have employment during tough times?
I think
Have we seen any change?
I think it's too early.
Okay.
I don't think you can just roll into the police station, knock on the door, and say I want to be a cop. There's some academy involved with all that. And the
Yeah,
academy
but
is
we pay them to go to the academy, or we can.
we can.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen that yet. I did
Okay.
talk to Chief about that the other day, thinking maybe it would be a good time to be a police officer in Port Orange. We'll look into that.
Jake, if I can just jump in real quick.
Please.
For the rest of the dais to be aware of is that the academies have been shut down.
Oh,
So-
it has been shut down?
Yes. So
Oh, okay.
there is a little bit of an issue that hasn't been able to get worked out between what FDLE standards are and the state colleges in terms of all the social distancing, yet you've got
Okay.
defensive tactics, you've got all the high liabilities. You cannot do that. So the academies have essentially stopped. They have ceased. They have not been in session. So there is going to be
Additional
a
lag.
significant backlog and lag, and there's no way, because of the FDLE standards, and from what I understand, and Jake, you can chime in when you may not know tonight, but when you do have that information, from what I understand is that FDLE has not budged on those standards. So even when things get up and running, Some of the standards are for, like, let's say a high liability class for defensive tactics. They have to have so many square footage of matted space under certain conditions, under normal conditions. So you can't just say, well, instead of running 30 in a class, we'll do 45 now to make up. It's not going to happen. So there's a lot of those kind of issues that haven't been fully determined. But what we do know is that there is going to be a backlog of being able to get those
And
classes
with
back
that, I
up
think
and
it's
produce
safe to
candidates.
say, we'll see some agencies
Chief,
poaching
Chief
from each
says
other.
they're still negotiating.
Yeah, they're still negotiating. So some other counties, by the way, in Central Florida have completely stopped doing it the way we're doing it now, and everybody that goes to the academy must be hired, and that has to do with workers' compensation abilities. If they're fully hired by us and they go to these academies and they get sick and something happens, they're covered. Right now, a lot of them that are going through the academy, that wouldn't apply. So I understand that has something to do with some of the negotiations and stuff, but it's a very interesting thing to watch, because I agree, Marilyn, in the past, what we've seen when economies get, monies are tough, you see those jobs are treasured. I mean, they're great, a lot of your turnover stops, things
Yeah.
like that, but
We do have some jobs that are seeing an uptick in good qualified candidates. So
Well,
we're seeing it, just
Wouldn't
not.
the issue with training also apply to firefighters and EMT?
Yeah, but the
Perhaps.
firefighting academy's still open.
Oh,
They
okay, I
don't-
guess because they think maybe the smoke gets
They
rid of COVID?
they always wear bunker gear and face masks and,
and they're not regulated by FDLE, so
well, and then there's
Yeah,
that.
That's the issue.
well, but there's I thought there was, okay, thank you.
I was
They're
gonna say,
regulated by somebody, but
we'll have to
it's
be
just
aware
not a-
that to fill those needs, our agencies will probably start poaching from each other again, so we should be.
So some
probably
of-
be
some of the,
prepared for
What
that.
about looking at recent retirees or something, bringing them back, or they retire from other or something? I mean, if there's a shortage and you gotta fill something, is that even a possibility?
And police officers?
Yeah.
You know, I thought
maintain
I
their certification.
read that Florida retirement system, I could be wrong, didn't they, because now, yeah, you've got to be out 11 months before you can go back, and I think if you retired, they'll allow you to jump back in because they knew there was
Yeah.
an issue in corrections and police. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking retirees from other departments coming here and
yeah.
filling the, I don't know, might have to get creative somehow and consider just about anything as long as they're a viable candidate. You don't have your certificate anymore, do you, Scott?
nope,
Could you get it back?
nope.
Okay.
Not interested. Uniform won't fit anymore, so
Okay.
I'm out.
We'll
All
put
right.
you on
Bid
the
for
desk.
King and
Okay,
Country.
hey, I can respect that.
I'm out.
We have ACOs.
Yeah, I'm good.
ACO.
What else you got, Jake?
So, some other things that we probably need to consider, Riverwalk South is budgeted in the CIP for 1.5 million next year, and little nickel dime stuff that is in the CIP that'll probably cut out. You'll never see it, equaling about $40,000-$50,000 here and there. But bottom line is I can probably based on the personnel freezing and the project freezing that we've done in 20, I can get you there without having to go back to
When you
go
say
back
get me
to
there,
the
you're
well
talking about getting us through this fiscal year?
this fiscal year, barely, or we might need to go to the well. What do you think, Scott? $500,000 maybe? If depending on how the revenue pans out. This is all based on estimates. But next year, like you said, there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. Either and again, we spend a lot of time talking about 1/3 of our revenue because that's the third we control.
Right.
And it's always tough because I know who pays for that 1/3 too. We pay for the other 2/3 as well, but it's interesting we
Small
don't.
portion,
And truth be told, I think the millage for the school board is more than our cities.
Yes.
It
but,
is.
But we don't spend as much time over there complaining about how they spend money. It's just, oh, it's for the kids. We'll spend it. A little bit different here. So We need to make some tough decisions, and staff, to the T, everybody is ready to execute whatever plan we come up with. But Scott Niels brings up a good point about the fund balance. We've been playing with that since I got here, and it's been sweet, but we got to stop. And luckily, the infrastructure that the people care the most about, for the most part, is paid for with the enterprise funds, but those will also come back to haunt us if we don't take a look at them. Water, sewer, drainage, we're doing great projects. We're spending a lot of money. When's the last time somebody complained about flooding on a rainy day? It's been a long time. Our drainage team is doing a phenomenal job, spending about 90% of their time east, solving some big problems out there. Virginia Monroe, House Street, all those things are happening. But we're burning through money, and all that collection, we're starting to spend through it, and we really need to take a look at our fees. And the mayor brought up a good point. He's brought it up a few times. Is we don't want to. Let's not do that. And this is a bad year for that. This is a bad year for that. And 10 years go by. Next thing you know, you're like the animal licenses. It's been 30 years since we raised it. So you double it, and everybody has a fit because you doubled their funds. So something ought to be considered next year as we work through FY21 to look at an incremental increase that is based on projects, and we have that project we have all these projects from the half cent sales tax argument. I can show you how we're going to spend that money.
And we didn't create those projects for the benefit of putting it out.
No, they were always there.
They
We
were-
just threw them at the half cent sales
Those
tax
were
as a
unfunded
reason.
projects we had on the books
Right.
already.
Those were already needed.
So-
we put needs up there.
So we look for a little bit of your guidance to get started. I ask every year to not do it based on millage, but one of you have already come out and said, I want to go to rollback, so now you've set the bar after you said you didn't want to do it. So what I don't want to do is send my staff out to write a budget only for it to go, oh heck no. So give us a little bit of a warm feeling about where you want to go, what you want to do, and I'll bring you back something close. If you like the way we did a la carte next year, I can do a la carte and show you all the stuff that the city staff thinks is necessary or would like, and you can pick from it. But I guarantee you, based on what I think is going to happen, a turn the page budget is a non-starter. It's not going to get you there, and that's mainly. And I'll let it ride a year, but you cannot not budget to refund the fund balance.
In years past, normal operandus was that we could take whatever overage from last year and roll it into next year.
Yeah,
And
that's going to sustain our budget this year.
And that has
Yeah,
worked
that's not-
because, okay, we manage it, this is what we had, we
Yeah.
manage it effectively, we have an overage, well, then you have it there to manage the next year. And then we had a couple of years with hurricanes and things like that, then there was no overage.
Right.
So instead of looking at that overage from good management, we're looking, that was gone because of emergency management and no reimbursements. So instead, we're looking at fund balance to do that. And it's a very tricky thing. And with that, I think you've heard enough from me. I think you need to hear from each of us individually. Chase, what are your thoughts on what the manager was saying?
I'll be brief. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm very much of a pain every budget season. And I say no to a lot of requests because at some point we're going to be here and having to make even tougher decisions, cutting back services that I didn't feel that should have been even implemented in the first place. That said, we are in a very different predicament. I think these are the kind of things that fund balances are for indeed. I agree with the mayor. That's the position I was coming in with. I'm not interested in the penny above rollback. There's going to be a combination of cutting services and borrowing from ourselves in order to get through it. But you know, we've raised things 3 years in a row, this council has, so I'm not interested in asking our residents, many of whom have either been laid off, furloughed, or taken serious pay cuts, to ask them to pay any more to a local government who has not laid anybody off, nor have I wanted to lay anybody off, furlough anybody. But I'm not interested in asking for any sort of increase from our residents, and I know that's going to be some tough calls. Not prepared to make them.
Okay. Marilyn?
I'm not interested in any increase. I do think that residents have really are feeling the effects of COVID and concerns about not having jobs or fewer hours and those type of things. One of the things I would suggest is perhaps all of us need to review what we think. One of the things that I've heard since I've been on my tenure is, well, Port Orange, we're just a little bit better. The reality is you pay for that, and some of that may be things that truly aren't so much of a difference, and I might ask you to look at it with new eyes. I agree we don't want to mow quarterly, but do we need to mow weekly Dunlawton?
Yes.
I mean, maybe we say Dunlawton if it's one of our you know, gateways, but Williamson. I'm just sort of suggesting some of the things when we think about what service means, we probably have to do the tough questions because, and ask, will it truly be the worst thing in the world if that's where we hold the line, so that we can continue to have the staff, enough police to answer calls, enough fire, enough EMTs to answer calls, enough people to do parks and rec. So I would say that. The other thing I would say is I am a little concerned about putting all the capital projects on hold. If there's a way that staff might be able to think about things, and the reason I say that is costs are going to continue to go up, and so if we, like I'm thinking of the gymnasium renovation and some of the other things, is there a way to think about the bids or things that we do so that instead of making it a 2-year, we do it a 3-year, but when we get those bids, we require, you know, certain costs be locked in, if you will, so we end up getting the advantage of starting something now and have, you know, some cost benefits to that. At the end of the day, having said all that, my bottom line is I don't want to go above, I don't want any price increase in taxes.
Drew?
We haven't had a shade meeting. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I support rollback, because not knowing the revenue predictions and what's coming forward, I don't believe we'd be able to meet our obligations at rollback. I believe it'd be impossible to meet our obligations for next year at rollback. And Scott has sat up here many times, and we've all agreed that the, you know, certain service levels and things that we're doing that are over and above or the way we're performing now are expected. And if they're cut, there's going to be a lot of backlash. And I know certain people will be like, I don't care about this, but overall, if you look at it, the bottom line is they expect a certain service level from us across the board. And, you know, they're going to revolt if that service level isn't there. So I can't sit here and say that I support rollback right now because I believe it'd be a disaster. We would not be able to meet our obligations, and we don't even know what some of those are gonna be, because I know we have a shade meeting coming up. However,
Next week.
we don't know where that's gonna end up. We have 2 labor contracts, so I'm concerned moving forward, that, you know, based on all the revenue streams,
Right.
the general fund is a little over a third, or right about a third of where we're at. So that other 2/3, those streams are gonna shrink as well. And, you know, fund balance and all those things.
Puts us in a spot.
We're
It sure
really
does.
gonna have to get creative
Yep.
just to meet our obligations. So I'm concerned moving forward, but I can't say right now that I'd support rollback, because I think that's really gonna make things difficult on our staff, our people, and our city. So that's my thoughts on it right now. Until we get a little bit more information, I think we're gonna have some serious difficulties meeting our obligations based on rollback. Period.
Scott?
So none of us saw this coming a year ago, did we?
No.
Yeah, you know, it's gonna be, this will definitely be a very interesting budget year, budget cycle going through. There are tons and tons of projections out there all over. You watch any of your media sources, you watch what the state's trying to do, you watch what the federal government's trying to do. There is a lot of unknowns still. You look at the housing market in the state of Florida. You know, I've got builders that are telling me that they thought they were fixing to see a huge shutdown, put their foot on the brakes. Now they're saying, man, that's just not going to happen. They're forecasting to start seeing all these people coming out of the big cities in the Northeast, headed to Florida, where it's more affordable and they're not living on top of each other and things like that. So I mean, I think there's all kinds of stuff that we're likely to see. I think a lot of it depends on how quickly the economy gets back up and running as well. The unemployment thing is quite interesting. You know, you see these numbers that would just blow the mind away, and you're seeing 30 million people. Well, some of those are true layoffs. Some of them are strategic layoffs. You know, when you've got folks that are out there drawing
Strategic
$875
unemployment?
a
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
which is $300 more than if they were actually back at their jobs, they don't want to go back to work. I don't blame them. I get it. I mean, the federal government made a strategic decision to do this. And I talk to employers, employees, and I know people personally that they don't want to go back to work. They want to maximize that 12 weeks because financially it's benefiting them, but they still sit in that category as being unemployment. But when that timeline elapses, they're back to work. So in some of the restaurants, even in our local community, they are having a hard time getting people to want to come back to work. So I look at a lot of that stuff and I'm like, I don't know that we know the full impact of all of this. And I appreciate Scott's projections, you know, forecasting the worst case scenario, right? It's kind of like, you know, we try to do with our fund balance. You know, when I started on council 5 years ago, there was no line. We had no policy. We had nothing. You know, sometimes the fund balance was almost at 50%, you know, and we're like, what's going on? And so, you know, we've tried to work at that over the years and come up with some of those things, and yet sometimes we still see it creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, you know, and trying to deal with that. So I think we got a long way to go. I think it's gonna definitely take a lot of really good staff recommendations, Jake, and your team, trying to see how do we tighten the belt as much as possible so that we're not trying to hide fat or make it look like we're doing that, and we shouldn't, but also still try to maintain as close as possible to the expectations of the residents. And I get that as we sit as a council, geographically speaking, all of our districts are a little bit different and everybody's expectations are a little bit different. I get that. And so, you know, that's just the nature of who we are as a community, and that's great. That's a good thing. But we'll figure it out. I mean, as we're going through it, we're going to have to make some hard calls. I get it. You know, I want the residents of ours that we represent that are the least impacted and the most impacted to all feel like they've been represented quite well through this entire process, however we get there. And it will be, it's gonna be a tough year. I get it. This is not something anybody forecasted. It'd be easy if we knew this was coming, right? We knew 3 years ago this was gonna happen. I mean, here we are every year, we try to play a little bit of defense. Well, what if we have another hurricane? What if we have another virus, right? What if we have another, whatever happens. So it's gonna be tough. I think that we just gotta stay in communication. We gotta have these meetings. We gotta start putting the black and the white down and hey, this is something we can live without. Maybe we can live with 30% less of this, or whatever those different things are, and we'll get there. We will get there. So, but I think what's going to have to happen is like the mayor was talking about, is the starting point is going to be your staff coming back and saying, here's what we think we can do, and still maintain as close to the quality of service that we see year in, year out. This is going to be a huge year for department heads, huge in my opinion, to show what they're made of, what can they do, how can they think out the box, how can they come up with things that none of us have thought of,
Right.
and then bring that to us, and let's see what that would look like from an application standpoint.
So keep in mind, something I was just thinking about when you were talking, Scott, is that we put a lot of things on the a la carte that we determined we needed. Well, some of those things are now frozen. And then we had things that were on the a la carte that we agreed that we would fund if we have money, right? If we get reimbursed by FEMA. So now the stuff that we thought we needed is on that. If we get revenue, we'll pay for. So the things that we thought we needed but couldn't afford are now pushed off a year. So next year, whatever we were going to do to get back on schedule when the FEMA stuff came through, is being delayed now another year, right? So we are going to keep on pushing infrastructure and pushing things back and back and back, and just like some of the other stuff, I don't mind pushing it back, but it's going to end up being emergency costs, right? So we're always going to be reacting again. This is going to happen. We're going to do that. Water pipe's going to break. We're going to pay an outrageous amount instead of fixing it on our own schedule. So consider that too as we try to defend, which in the past couple of years we haven't, until last year when we deferred a lot of infrastructure work. That as time goes on, if we keep on playing defense and protecting that which we have, and the millage rate and the fund balance, that less and less gets done, and that started last year, so it'll probably happen again this year and next fiscal year, that we will fall behind if we're not smart in what we do. So I understand where we are in the rollback versus not rollback, and I think your speculation on the estimates are right. What if some funding comes down that helps us offset revenue? What if they do say you can use this to offset revenue? Well, that sweetened up the pot a little bit. What if Scott's 30% revenue reduction projection ends up being 5%, because the people that are collecting unemployment are spending more money because they're making more money than when they were working? I don't know. What if Port Orange's fixed income people saved the day because they didn't change their habits too much, which I think they did, but we'll see how it all turns out, and it will be a very challenging year. But as you said, our department heads can think out of the box, already have started, and are coming up with some great ideas to save money.
And also, as Jake, as you and Scott bring more presentations and things as we go through the budget year, one of the things I would like to see as clearly indicated as possible is when we're looking at funds, especially project type stuff, if it's attached to other funds where we get matching dollars from either state, federal, or whatever, I want to make sure because I want to make sure if we decide
TPO is a good, yeah.
Yeah, if we decide we're not going to spend this $1, I want to make sure we know we're foregoing these 4 over here.
You bet.
Because I think that's huge. I mean,
You bet.
we went through a period of time as a city before my time on council where they had to make tough decisions, and some of the decisions they made, like, for example, they stopped repaving roads and sidewalks that were on schedules to be doing a little bit every year. Well, then when they stopped doing that, you had that backup, and then this council has had to deal with that in ways that have been really tough over the last few years, because we're trying to catch up, and we still haven't caught up.
By the way, yeah, so.
And those are
Lynn,
big issues.
Lynn Stevens, well, Ronnie Buttram, yeah, that team is just now spending FY20 money on paving. Just now.
Yeah.
We've been paving for like 2.5 years. We just now got into FY20 money about 2 months ago,
Yeah.
probably.
So we just need to be mindful of that and what the impact of a decision is going to be for years. It'll be tough. We'll get it out. We got the right team up here. This council will work good together, and we'll figure it out.
Indeed. You have what you need from us for now?
Clear as mud.
No, but I'll manage. I'm sure it'll start to come a little.
I think over the next, I really think also too that over the next 60 days, as things are transitioning back, some of these projections may need to be and probably will be changed.
Oh, we'll keep
Good
up
or
on
bad,
it.
we don't know,
Yeah.
but
Right.
we are, we're just now on the cusp of reality and society and economy and everything starting to head back to where we were.
So-
Things may never look like that
So
again,
that's,
I don't know, but.
that's the question, that's the conundrum that we have as a staff every time. Do we start with a gutted budget and add stuff to it, or do we start with a big budget and cut? So if you start with a gutted budget and add to it, I'm just thinking out loud that doesn't look good for an elected official to start adding things to a budget. And then if you bring in a fat budget and you start cutting, then staff's like, oh man, it was in and now it's out and I'm being robbed. Not that we are being robbed, but so we try to come in with that happy medium and really make those tough decisions with the a la carte. In a perfect world, I'd present you a budget and you go, really, this is what you need, and you approve it. But it never happens like that. It's never happened in any city I've worked in. Worked with, not in. This is the only city I've worked in.
So from my perspective,
So-
Jake, what I'm going to be looking for is, I want to start with the idea of how do we maintain as much as possible the quality of life that we have today. I get that it's going to look a little different, may have some changes, whatever. But that's the benchmark I'm looking for.
That's the benchmark you're looking for.
Right,
I've got 3 rollbacks here.
I got it.
So
Well, I'm
gotta
not
write-
saying-
I'm not writing 5 different budgets.
Right, but I'm not saying that I know that we're going to get there. But when I talk to constituents and they say, well, how come we don't have this anymore or that anymore or whatever, I want to let them know we fought as hard as we could to keep it exactly where your expectations were and what the quality of life is that we've all become accustomed to, and here's why. And I'm making that in regards to the other scenario
Right.
that you're talking about. I'm not interested in that whatsoever. I'm
Got
just
it.
not. The other thing that the residents can do, and we can all do too, is we got to continue to encourage and get the message out for our residents to stay local, shop local, spend your money local.
I think
Help
we're
these
starting a
local
campaign on
businesses.
that.
I heard there was a campaign that's, is there any bumper stickers? I've seen a couple
Because
signs.
it's a lot easier
Yeah.
to make a bumper sticker than it is to build a budget.
But you know, that all does help. That helps to save jobs, save businesses, save all these things. And the more that every single job we can save and every business we can save is going to benefit this community in the short term and in the long term for sure.
I'm going to ask the question, is there anything else you need from us tonight?
Yes. Am I going to start building a budget for rollback, or building a budget that based on out of the box thinking with everything I think we need to continue the level of service we have, and we will make cuts or increases as necessary to get to the budget you all want?
Which I think.
Either way, we're going to get to the budget you all want.
Which I think we've.
How do you
expressed.
want me to start? I don't want to present a budget that you all look at and go, why are we getting this? What do you want?
What I want is to make sure that we are able to you give us the options that'll give us the opportunity to make those decisions.
every budget we provide gives you the opportunity to cut or add. How do you want to see it the first time? It's right now. It's 3 people have said I want rollback. I would like just.
I want to see rollback, but I want to see what it
I will show you rollback, and then you can go, oh my God, we can't do that. And I'll go from there.
Getting me to rollback is not a turn-the-page budget, and I know that. If you give me rollback, you've made the cuts. We should make the cuts. You give me a turn-the-page budget with the cuts you already think are appropriate, and make proper recommendations, and we'll make decisions from there. Is
Got it.
that
Turn
better?
the page budget.
It's
Now it's 3-2.
no, not really, because I still want rollback, but I'm going to make those decisions.
How do you want the first budget to be presented?
This is a first draft. I need to see what.
Got it.
Honestly, for me to get to rollback, I need to know what a turn-a-page budget looks like.
So now I have 3 people that want to turn the page budget.
I want you to give me a budget of what you've got this year and no more.
Which is not a turn the page budget.
Our residents cannot afford an increase.
You all talk amongst yourselves. Let me know what you want.
You're a smart guy, I think you can figure it out. I don't like being put in the position of always having to cut, quite honestly.
I just mentioned that, yeah.
And I think it's more, it's difficult for me to defend to citizens that I talk with. They're getting the same money this year as they got last year. Period. And then anything else really needs to go on the a la carte and needs to have a discussion. People are saying, I'm not looking at any more money. You know,
Right.
and we continue. Last year I got a budget that was well above the CPI. I'm not looking for anything greater than the CPI, and the CPI is like what, 1.2, 2? That's what I'm looking for. But I'm only one person.
I'll reiterate the same thing. Pandemic or not, I was looking for rollback this year as it is. You pretty much know where my position is. Just
Yep.
tell me what we have, what are our means, and let's find a way to live with that.
I mean, you know where I stand. I want to see what.
I got the 2 to the left, I got the 2 to the right, and I think I know the one in the middle. You all know you don't make it easy. But,
No.
But we will persevere.
With that,
Have we ever made it easy?
No.
And yet?
Some things.
have a good night.